Happy Thursday, everybody. Josh here with On the Wrong Lead. Another episode of Drankin' Champagne. I am Drank. He is Champagne. Joined as always by Mr. Andrew Champagne, the Miller High Life of horse racing, apparently.
We're going
And
there. We're going
I don't
there
know.
to start the show. We're going there with the one funny thing Raider Mike has ever said in his life. We're going there. Okay. All right. I no longer have bitterness over what I'm about to do. Okay. That's just fine. First of all, if you are still with us after that incredibly passive-aggressive introduction on the part of my co-host, welcome to this week's show. We're very happy to be bringing this to you here. We're going to eventually be diving into the All-Turf Pick 3 at Keeneland for Friday, April 11th. If you like what we do and you're following this on YouTube, go down below, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Really helps us out, especially when we're doing shows like this, so that we can experiment and get things off on the wrong foot and leave one co-host wondering how to get back at the other, except this one is just too perfect. Josh, I have a burning question for you. How did you celebrate Lord Miles Day on Tuesday?
I knew it.
How'd you celebrate?
I don't know. I'm sure I said something snarky to you in chat.
You didn't say it in chat, but the On the Wrong Lead Twitter had something that popped up.
Okay. Yeah.
Not interested. Yeah. And as I mentioned in my reply, every party has its pooper. One thing I will say is I do know of at least one Lord Miles Day miracle. It is not my story to tell, but I will say it was a genuinely cool story that involved one of my friends that is going to be at my wedding in about 2.5 months. So I'll tell you that story possibly off the air, but that was a genuinely cool thing that happened. I called it a Lord Miles Day miracle, and I got no pushback for it. So that's where we're going with that. And after Josh's incredibly snide remark to open the show, I think we're even.
Yeah. So what have you been up to, Andrew? Anything new and exciting?
Lots of excitement. May we live in interesting times is a proverb that should just never be followed. But lots going on as far as the racing side of things. This week's edition of the Kentucky Derby Bubble just went live over on Pollock Report. So broke down the top 20 Derby horses as they stand right now. Of course, things bound to change with defections and horses that are sidelined. As it stands right now, as of this recording, horses need 50 Kentucky Derby points plus graded stakes earnings to be eligible. There are a couple of horses with 50 that are on the outside looking in and need at least one horse, possibly two, to go out of the field before they're able to come in. Obviously, we've got plenty of time between now and Derby Day. I believe it's about 3.5 weeks. So there's going to be some changes. There's going to be some things that don't go according to plan. But we've got as clear a picture as any of the possible Kentucky Derby field. After 4 Kentucky Derby preps over this past weekend, well, 3 over this past weekend and 1 on Tuesday. Keeneland followed the advice of a song that came out in my college days. They turned up on a Tuesday, and what came out of that was a renewal of the Bluegrass won by Burnham Square. So lots going on there. Pollock Report has my stuff. Hong Kong has been going. I'll also be looking at Australia for Twin Spires later on this week. May also have some more fun freelance stuff in the works, so stay tuned. As those of you who follow wrestling will understand, I am the Joe Hendry of the horse racing media space. Say my name and I appear.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about the Derby, but before we get into that, I actually had a rehearsal today. I actually got contacted about a gig playing, which hasn't happened since post-COVID, like 2021, 2022 is probably the last time I played. So, we actually played. So we played a gig the Saturday before everything shut down.
Oh.
And what was funny about that gig is it was St. Patrick's Day. It was a St. Patrick's Day gig. And we normally drew pretty well, right? We had probably, like, we weren't playing huge places, right? But the same 20 to 30 people would show up to all these gigs, right? Now, granted, like, right, we're playing like these bars, these pretty, not huge venues. We have played bigger venues and we would draw people there too, but when we would play these small little bars, we'd see the same 15, 20 people all the time. Only one guy showed up that I recognized. There were other people in the bar, but only one like fan of ours showed up. And that we were kind of like we were playing a different spot than we normally did. And so we're like, man, did no one just like want to drive out here? Like, is this like did we just go too far? Or is this thing more serious than everyone is kind of leading on? Lo and behold, about 4 or 5 days later, the whole world shut down. So we ended up playing 2 more gigs after that, after stuff kind of opened up outdoors. And, it was supposed to be like socially distanced out, and we were playing outdoors, right? And I could tell that the kind of like the guy who was our like the band lead, like he was not comfortable with it after the second one, because basically all the precautions they said they were going to take, like, they didn't,
Of course.
because profits be damned. And he's like, I think we're going to pause for a little bit, and we never really got back together after that. But one of the guys who I used to play in that band with reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and so he's like, hey, like, you want to play this gig? And I'm like, sure. So did a rehearsal today, so that should be fun. And then just like, because once it starts happening, and everyone starts contacting you. I had another unrelated person contacting me about another possible gig. So I was like,
Nice.
oh, look at this. So I might be I might have a couple future gigs here. So that'll be fun.
Do you
But
take requests?
no, usually not. Depends how much they tip. And if we know the
Freebird!
song.
Freebird!
God. It's a reggae band, so I don't think you're gonna get Freebird out
Are
of
you
us.
kidding? A reggae version of Freebird would bring the house down.
Um, but talking. I know you're talking about your Derby bubble on Pollock Report. We just had kind of the last set of preps. As it stands now, nobody running in the Lexington can get enough points to get in. So we basically have, I don't know, the top 25-ish horses who can probably get in. And I just had a couple of questions, Andrew, because I think you have a better memory for this kind of stuff than I do. 50 points. Does that seem like a lot of points required to get into the gate?
It does, but remember, we're 3.5 weeks out. That number's going to fall. You're going to have horses in the mid 40s whose connections decide to point for something else. I mean, just as one example, Matticat Road has, I believe, 46 points. I can't see them going to the Derby with him. He seems like a one-turn miler type. And if that's the case, the Pat Day Mile is right there, especially when Bob Baffert and company have 2 horses that are going to be in the Kentucky Derby field regardless. You're also going to wind up with horses that, take a wrong step in their barn at some point and need a week or 2 off. And unfortunately, that comes around at a terrible time. That happens every year with some horses. You just hope it doesn't happen to yours if you've got a contender there. I think that number is going to come down a bit. I think what you're going to wind up seeing is horses with 45 points are going to be in pretty good shape.
Okay. Yeah, and so I guess anything this weekend kind of stand out to you from either of the big races?
So Burnham Square winning the Bluegrass stood out to me for sure for a couple of different reasons. One, a couple of turf riders that have been around for a while pointed out some of the parallels between Burnham Square and a horse named Unbridled, who was trained by Carl Nafzger and won the Derby in 1990. Josh, this is an older horse racing reference, so I have no idea if you've seen this, but are you familiar with the story of Unbridled's Derby win?
Nope.
Okay. Unbridled was owned by a wonderful little old lady named Frances Genter, who was about 90. They turned for home in the Kentucky Derby, and NBC has a camera right on Carl Nafzger, the trainer, and he's huddled over Frances Genter, and he's calling the race for her because she can barely see. So he's screaming, he's going to win. He's going to win. He's going to win. Oh, I love you, Miss Jenner. And gives her a big hug. And it's this big, huge, wholesome moment. Jim McKay winds up hugging her in the winner's circle as well. Ian Wilkes was an exercise rider for Carl Nafsker during that time. He exercised unbridled. Well, he's got Burnham Square, who rallied to win the Bluegrass, nailed East Avenue right on the line. And Josh, if you can draw a line through the Fountain of Youth, what you have is a horse that beat to Pan Street 2 back in the Holy Bull. Technically, it's 3 back, but we're drawing a line through the Fountain of Youth. And then rallied to run down East Avenue over East Avenue's preferred track in the Bluegrass. I have Burnham Square 4th on my list. I think he could potentially be a serious player, but huge but coming. Journalism was really, really good in the Santa Anita Derby. I know he only faced 4 other horses. If you're going to try to poke holes in him, that's the hole that you probably try to pick. Having said that, Umberto Rispoli seemed to want to teach journalism something. And you could tell because when he came back to the winner's circle, he was covered in all of the dirt that he took from other horses. Top of the stretch, he swings out, and he looks like a monster. He winds up running down a horse named Baeza, wins going away while a couple of Baffert horses wind up struggling home in 4th and 5th. Citizen Bull being one of them. I do want to caution people that are writing him off. I think Team Baffert tried to use the Santa Anita Derby to teach Citizen Bull a couple of things, and it just didn't take. I'm drawing a line straight through that race. Are there red flags? Absolutely. He's one of several horses that figure to need the lead on Derby Day. But I think dismissing a horse that has proven to be a grade 1 type horse around 2 turns is dangerous, especially given the barn that he's coming out of. I think journalism is your solid Kentucky Derby favorite right now. I think there's a couple of closers that could potentially be peaking at the right time. There's a couple of preps that I was not impressed by. The UAE Derby was one of them. They were at 1 mile and 3/16 in 158 and change. And a couple of horses from the Hyacinth Stakes over in Japan ran in that race. The Hyacinth's 4th place finisher won that race. He chased the horse that wound up winning Japan's Road to the Kentucky Derby. And that horse, I think, is probably about the only one you want coming out of Asia at this point. But if you're asking me which horse impressed me, give me journalism, give me Burnham Square.
Yeah, I said yes last week that the worst possible thing that could have happened to me this week is that Citizen Bull, that someone tries to teach him something. Because I'm going to cross a line through it, and I'm still going to be all over Citizen Bull. That effort last week might have been bad enough to talk me out of it. We'll see. I don't want to get like too like I don't want to make too many decisions until we see what happens. I really need East Avenue though to like spike a fever or something. I need that horse out because the horse that I have 107-1 future on just went wire to wire to win the Wood in Rodriguez. And before the weekend started, there was a clear lack of what seemed to be straight line speed going into it. People were all over. Were like, "There's not going to be any speed in this Derby." And what happens? We get Rodriguez going wire to wire. We get East Avenue getting enough points to get in, who showed a lot of speed. And now all of a sudden the Derby's looking a little bit, I think we're going to get pace in there. So I have a feeling my futures are cooked, but I can say I got closing line value on my future at least, because Rodriguez is going to be a tenth of the price, probably 10 to 12-1, as opposed to the 107-1 I got him. So
I was going to say between 15 and 20. I think
Okay.
You're going to wind up with people thinking the Wood Memorial wasn't anything great. But what I will say is Rodriguez looked pretty good winning the Wood Memorial. I don't know what he beat. I think if you're looking at races at longer distances, the runner-up Grande is a very interesting prospect. The Wood was his 3rd lifetime start. He was wide throughout, and seemed like a grinder type. Todd Pletcher said before the race that he may very well want longer than the mile and an eighth. And seeing him run in the wood, I wouldn't be surprised if those connections are a little bit annoyed that the Belmont isn't a mile and a half this year, because he runs like every bit of a mile and a half type horse. He gets an extra furlong in the Derby. I don't know if that's going to be enough. And as far as Rodriguez goes, I think he's got to go. East Avenue's got to go. Citizen Bull's got to go. And there's going to be a couple of other horses in there that are going to want to break and be forward. So I'm not saying you don't have a shot. In fact, I think it's a great bet that you made, because you're getting 5 or 6 times the price on Rodriguez. But I would be shocked if he winds up getting yet another, to quote our buddy Caleb, candy ass trip on Derby Day. Because that's what it was. He went early and nobody chased him.
Yeah. Just a quick, we're gonna go through these real quick, because one of the big old school angles, right, is you have to have run 100 buyer at 3 leading up to the Derby. Journalism obviously tops it with 108 figure that they got last time out at Santa Anita, on March 1st rather, at Santa Anita, got a 108. Backed it up with a 102 this last time. Magnitude, who's no longer on the trail, also had a 108.
Hi Chase, how you doing?
Barnes, who is does not have enough points, right? And can't get enough
Barnes
points.
is he
Barnes
needed
is out.
a top 2 finishes. He needed a top 2 finish, in the Santa Anita Derby, and was nowhere close.
Yep, he has a 105, but he's no good. Journalism, we already talked about. Baeza doesn't have enough points to get in.
That's unfortunate.
And then you have 2 other horses from Oak Lawn that aren't in anything, and Clever Again and Cornucopian, who have 101s. And then after that, the only horse left is Rodriguez with a 101 and a 100 at Aqueduct and then at Santa Anita. So, yeah, I'm kind of sad I memed this into like reality, right? Because I had to bet the horse, right? It's like Caleb and the Knight horses, right? Caleb bets every horse named Knight. It's like, come on, of course I got to bet this. But after seeing the horse run once or twice this year, I kind of got Medina Spirit vibes from Rodriguez, in that wasn't necessarily Bob's top pick or top horse going into it. But then after a couple of races, just seemed to kind of peak at the right time. And I remember when Medina Spirit won or crossed the line first in the Derby.
Josh, I had Medina Spirit. I gave out Medina Spirit. I gave out betting strategies that hammered Medina Spirit and made it the best Derby of my life. He won.
I also had him, which was nice. But I was in Vegas right before some of Bob's horses scratched out, and Circa actually took the lines down for a couple.
Yeah,
of days.
You were telling me this story. It was when Life is Good went out, and Life is Good would have probably been the Derby favorite. And Medina Spirit had some appeal based on the logic of, okay, let's just assume Life is Good doesn't exist. And if you draw Life is Good's name out with a line in the form, all of a sudden Medina Spirit moved way up.
Yeah, I want to say that at the time Medina Spirit was like 50 or 75 to 1. And Caleb and I were talking like, hey, we got to get, like when I was in town, let's get some money down. And they took the lines down. The preps ended up happening. They put the lines back up, and I just didn't have time to get down. And like I got halved. It was like 25 to 1. And at that point, it was just like, it wasn't worth it. But yeah, I don't know. This is going to be, I think this is going to be a pretty interesting Derby. Obviously Journalism looked really, really good, but I do think there's a couple different ways you can kind of go. And we won't spend too much more time on it, because I mean, you're going to hear people blather on about the Derby for from now until the first Saturday in May, probably way more than you need to. So let's we got this Keeneland Turf Pick 3, but before we get into this, any thoughts on Keeneland so far? Kudos to them. pushing stuff back, and actually they're like, hey, we're just going to run basically a week straight. And although I think the meet got off to kind of a chalky start, I thought today, Wednesday's card was just chock full of prices, and we'll see what Thursday's card looks like, but I don't know. Friday and Saturday's cards both look really good.
So I'm personally hoping for more bombs on Thursday because there was a pick six carryover on Wednesday going into Thursday of somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think it was $45,000. And if we can get that carryover going into Friday, all of a sudden we're looking at a massive pick six pool in what I think is a very good card. We're looking at the all turf pick three here. This includes a couple of stakes races headlined by the grade one Maker's Mark Mile. This I thought was a very interesting sequence. I think there is a spot where you can single, but I also think there are a couple of very, very beatable favorites. To answer your original question, though, it's tough to pivot when you're Keeneland and you have everything set for a big opening weekend, and then not just rain, historic levels of rain and flooding come into Kentucky. And all of a sudden, Sunday is opening day. You're running Monday. You're running a Derby prep on a Tuesday. Ideal? No. Making the best of a bad situation? Absolutely. Keeneland does a lot of stuff right in that regard, and shout out to him. This card on Friday, another example of doing things right because I think there's legitimate value to be had in this all turf pick three, which, as a reminder, it's a $3 minimum. So some of the variables you're going to see and ticket multiples and stuff like that go off of a $3 base.
Yeah, and I think the one issue that Keeneland is going to have to figure out is their bird problem.
Their what?
Their bird problem.
Well, the bird is the word, as they say.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of crows.
Say it.
Caw, caw.
Oh, that's a
caw.
pathetic call. It's got to be caw, caw, caw. You've really got to get the diaphragm into it. Come on, Josh. You're a musician. You know how to use the diaphragm. Come on.
Yeah, I did see some Twitter discourse, right, talking about, you know, specifically about Jim not caring, and I don't know, man. I feel like they're in a tough spot, right? Because the amount of money that these computers toss around is ridiculous, and tracks saying no, like tracks can't say no to that money, but. I don't know. Something has to be done. I think Jim has done a lot of very, very good things, including this bet. Because
Yes.
what's happened with this bet? This bet is basically, this bet is over at Gulfstream now. This bet is over at Santa Anita now. So I do think that there are some good things, but yeah, hopefully we can figure out the issue. And it's not just a Keeneland issue; it's an issue at a ton of tracks. But I do think that Keeneland kind of gets it pretty bad. But we won't talk too much there.
Just
Else
really
on that.
quickly, just on the notion of people saying that Jim doesn't care. We're referring to Jim Goodman. He's one of the higher ups at Keeneland. I think that's bullshit. I think Jim absolutely cares. Ultimately, the happy medium is probably going to be cause can't play in certain pools. And if that's the case, okay. That's basically what NYRA does. They've been locking CAW groups out of certain pools, restricting play in certain pools. That's going to be the happy medium. Look, just take a glance at the handle numbers against inflation. It's not pretty. And you're saying tracks should just say no to this money that, in some instances, is keeping tracks open? Very rarely are things as easy as we want them to be. This is an example of one of those. Am I a fan of CAW groups? No, I don't think any serious horse player is. But in some instances, I do think there's an argument to be made for their presence, especially when we're talking about a difference in handle that could mean the difference between tracks being open and tracks having to mull their futures.
All right. Let's take a look here at the first leg of the Turf Pick 3. Yeah, we're going to have a nice field here. of 12. We have three AEs in this race. And your morning line favorite in this race is going to be the number 4 here, the Queen. You're getting 4-1 on Ramsey Pond, 9-2 on Play with Fire, 6-1 on Pressure, 8-1 on Rare Art, double digits on everybody else that is currently entered. Um, you know, I did not use the favorite in the 4 here, the Queen, in this spot. I went a couple of different directions. I have 2 A's in this spot. Um, you know, I look at this race and pace wise, I feel like there's a lot of speed in here. And I'm going to want somebody who's going to be coming from off the pace. I think my top pick is going to be the 5, Play with Fire. I think Broke Its Maiden at Fairgrounds coming from off the pace. They went to the dirt after that and ran kind of fine, but then came back to a stakes race last time, and was second by a head, and then just kind of tired out a little bit there on a good turf course, and has had about a month off here. Brendan Walsh is shipping in, and Luis Saez is the listed rider. He did take a bit of a tumble, which it just looked awful when it happened live, but it seemed like he was no worse for wear. I mean, they checked him out at the hospital, and incredibly, he basically said he was sore.
I can't
Which was
believe
nuts.
it, because that looked absolutely awful. And it's one of those instances where you see a fall that looks terrible and the jockey's fine. And then there are some times where you see a jock fall and go, oh, you ought to be able to bounce right up. And then those are some of the worst injuries that you see. I mean, it's absolutely incredible that Luis Saez may be in a position to return to the saddle sooner rather than later. But yeah, I'll get out of your way because spoiler alert, I think we see this race pretty similarly.
Yeah, really like the 5 in this spot. And then the other horse I'm going to use is going to be a Tony Dutro horse here. Dylan Davis rides Rare Art. And once again, I'm just kind of looking for a horse that's going to be coming from off the pace here. And this seemed like a horse that kind of sped up and had better figures as the kind of the season went on last year. Came back here at Gulfstream. I mean, it's tough to close at Gulfstream coming from that far out of it. Maybe the horse just needed that race. Coming here to, I think, a more closer-friendly turf course. I just think that Rare Art's going to get a nice setup here. And I think if it can run back to the stakes races from last year, I think is going to be in here with a shot. And then my lone B in this race is actually the 1, Ramsey Pond. And Ramsey Pond here is just a horse that's got a ton of starts for a 3-year-old already. Ran 3 times, or no, actually ran 5 times as a 2-year-old. And yeah, they broke its maiden at Kentucky Downs, and didn't seem to like really translate to the Gulfstream turf. But I think this is another one that is going to be coming from off the pace. And I think getting back to Kentucky, getting off that DERF or whatever you want to call it over at Gulfstream, I think is going to be good for this horse. So Jose Ortiz sees fit to ride here. Jose rides the Kentucky circuit very, very well. So I really like this horse here in this spot. I have this horse as a B. And the only, I had a question mark next to this 9 horse. I don't really know what Jack Sisterson has here. I'm going to have to go back and kind of dive a little bit deeper into that last race. But I thought this might be an interesting one here. Maybe one to check out the price that it is. And maybe if there's a couple of scratches as well, I'll toss on a couple of tickets. But I'm going to be, most of my money's going to go through the 5 and the 8, and I'm going to use the 1 as a B. Andrew, where did you land?
As I've mentioned, we see this race pretty similarly. I'm going to talk about the horse you didn't mention. That's Here the Queen. I don't like her at all whatsoever in this spot. Last time out, she had the all-time candy-ass trip on an easy lead, no opposition, was able to cruise, won by nearly 10 lengths. I don't think she beat a lot that day, and I think there's a lot of early speed. If she winds up getting a similar trip here and is able to get the job done, I will tip my cap and move on. Josh, this seems like the type of favorite you're supposed to try to beat. You mentioned Rare Art. Rare Art is my top pick. I really hope we get the 8-1 morning line come post time. I think we might get something close to that. I completely agree with you. I think she needed the race last time out at Gulfstream. Her best, as she showed last year, is pretty darn good. She was a nose away from being a stakes winner back on October 20th at Aqueduct. I'm using Play with Fire as well. I think she's a candidate to improve. I'll also use number 3, Pressure, who I think didn't much care for the synthetic last time out at Turfway and exited a pretty decent race where she just clearly was lacking some conditioning. She goes second off the bench here. She's got a nice race over this Keeneland track. And she, while having tactical speed, doesn't need the lead in order to run well. She's shown that she can stalk and get first run. That could be a nice trip. And I will use the horse that you briefly talked about, number 9, Sweet Illusions. I have seen Europeans getting first-time Lasix and getting Frankie Dettori first time in America way too much to leave this one off the ticket. Do I think she needs to improve? Probably. But I've seen this movie before. I'm singling elsewhere in the sequence. I've got a little room to spread. I just do not want this horse to beat me.
All right. Let's move on here to the second leg of the Turf Pick 3. We're going to be going 5.5 furlongs. It's the FanDuel Limestone for fillies 3 years old. And we get another nice full field of 12. We get 4 AEs in here. Andrew, I'll let you go first. Where did you land?
Cheap plug. I'm going to be appearing on our friend the Wolf of Oakland's show that is going to be recording on Thursday around midday. And I'm going to see this race very similarly to the way Chase sees every single sprint race he handicaps. Josh, I think there's way too much speed in here. I think there's a chance everything falls apart. I'm going 3 deep, and I am leaning very hard on horses that have shown they do not necessarily need the lead in order to run well. My top selection is number 12, Kilwin, who makes her first start of the 3-year-old season. She's 2 for 2 in turf sprints. They stretched her out to a mile in the Juvenile Fillies turf, and there's no shame running 5th against that group. Lake Victoria is a very good horse. Mayday Ready, Andrew Champagne Gambling Hall of Famer, Mayday Ready, very good horse. Nitrogen, very good horse that came back to win a stakes race earlier this week at Keeneland. She ran 5th behind those horses. That's not bad. She's been working very well. She's going to get a pace to run at. And if she's ready, which I think she is, I think she's got a big chance. The other two I'm going to be using, number 5, It Ain't 2, is probably my favorite horse in the program on Friday at Keeneland. Josh, if you could scroll to her and tell me how many times this horse ran as a 2-year-old.
13?
13 times. There are good horses that don't run 13 times in their careers. She ran 13 times as a 2-year-old and didn't make a start for most of November and all of December. I respect the heck out of horses like that, and she has shown that she's good enough to win this on her best day. I see Frankie Dettori riding for Riley Mott. I see a last-out bullet down at Palm Meadows. I think this one may very well be a runner. The other one that I'm going to use is number 7, Mighty Ariu. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, my apologies. Her prior connections thought enough of this horse to run her in the Queen Mary at Royal Ascot back in June, and she was a good second of 24 on that occasion. After that race, she was 7-1 in a Group 2 over at Newmarket. It's safe to assume something went wrong that day because we didn't see her again until March. She showed up at Fairgrounds, and she broke her maiden very professionally. It wasn't like she set the world on fire with her figure, but I really think that improvement is logical here at second asking. Ben Curtis has quietly been riding very well so far at this Keeneland meet. I believe he's 3 for 9 to this point. So I think Mighty Ariu has plenty to like as well. There are some nice horses in this particular field, horses that I think you're going to want to keep an eye on. Specifically, number 9, Dream Away for Wesley Ward has a lot of early speed. Number 6, She's So Spicy has a lot of early speed. Number 4, Aviento is a closer, but I just think may very well need a race. That's the one that I wish I had a little bit more of a budget to throw in just on the off chance she's ready and the race falls apart. If there are scratches elsewhere in the sequence, I'd say throw her in. But I'm riding with the 3 that I mentioned. I'm 5, 7, and 12 in here. And I just think there is so much speed with a bunch of horses that haven't shown they can rate and pass others late. Give me the closers in the limestone, Josh.
I am going to take a different approach to this. I see speed. I'm going to take the horse I think is the fastest early, and that's going to be the 6. She's So Spicy. Irad sees fit to jump aboard here. This is a horse that has been blazing. I mean, I see a 3 furlong work in 34 and 2. All right. I see a 4 furlong work in 45 and 3. This is a horse that is going to come out of the gate just absolutely blazing. And, I'm going to take a shot. That's my top pick in this race. I think is the horse to beat in here, but it's not going to be the only horse I use. I think I agree with you on the 12 Kilwin. I really love this horse coming back to the sprint distance. I love the cutback for this horse. George Arnold, Mr. Rusty Arnold, a good friend of mine, likes to say, Rusty Arnold always points at Keeneland. So seeing this horse in this spot, like I said, hopefully Luis Saez is going to be healthy enough to ride, because him and Rusty Arnold are 2 for 5 over the last 2 months. So, and I there aren't many riders better at turf sprints than Luis Saez. So I hope he's fit to ride. But yeah, those are the 2 horses I'm using. However, an AE I kind of want to point out is number 13, Lovely Emma. I see Flavian Pratt's named on this horse. Flavian does have a mount for George Weaver in this race, so I don't know what his first preference is, right? But if this horse draws in, and Flavian is aboard this horse, you got to use this horse. Peter Urton has been shipping live horses to Keeneland or to Kentucky the last couple months. He did very, very well at Turfway. He's off to a very, very good start at Keeneland. I think he had a winner today at a nice price. And yeah, I think Lovely Emma is going to be one you have to use. I think up against it, pace-wise, is going to be out in the parking lot. But I don't know. This is another horse. If you look, has been here at Keeneland the last couple of weeks and is also just burning it up there on the training track. So if this horse draws in, and Flavian's aboard, I mean, if there's anybody who's going to be able to work out a trip from out there with the speed horse and be able to rate it in some way, shape, or form, I think it's probably Flavian Pratt. So I didn't include this on my ticket that I'm posting, but if this horse draws in and Flavian's aboard, I'm using this horse.
I can't say I blame you with Lovely Emma, largely because, look, if you're seeing the Brisnet Pass performances, you see E8, Josh is going to be on the horse. That's just the way things work. I don't make the rules. I'm just conveying them. My concern with Lovely Emma and with She's So Spicy, both horses ran very well last time out. I'm not taking that away from them. I see that big old L. They're not running with Lasix here. That concerns me a little bit. And with She's So Spicy, she ran that figure at Gulfstream Park over a very, very firm turf course. That is not to say that Gulfstream horses can't go to Keeneland and run well, but those are 2 very different turf courses. Keeneland's turf course, a lot more lush. There's some give to it. It's not the Gulfstream Park turf course where you see talented horses go 5 furlongs in 54. That's just not the surface you're getting here. That's not to say they can't win, but in a race with a lot of early speed, give me horses that have at least shown they don't need the lead and can run well over similar turf courses. I think that's the reason we're both on Kilwin a little bit too.
All right, race 3, the payoff leg, the Maker's Mark Mile. We're going to be going a mile here on the turf, 4-year-olds and up. Andrew, I'll let you go first because you got a single in here.
Yeah, I know that you are a bit pressed for time, so I'm going to keep this very short. Carl Spackler looks loaded for this one. This is a professional miler that doesn't want a mile in a 16th. He doesn't want a mile in an eighth. He doesn't want 7.5 furlongs. This is a horse that wants 1 mile and gets 1 mile. I think there's plenty of speed in here for him to sit just off the pace on. Flavian Pratt hops aboard in place of Tyler Gaffleone, who is on the mend. Tyler, get well soon. Carl Spackler has shown that he can run very well here at Keeneland. Last October, he won the Turf Mile here, won it by a length over More Than Looks, who came right back and won the Breeders' Cup Mile. He's got tactical speed, but he definitely doesn't need the lead in order to run well. Chad Brown has kept him pretty sharp down at Payson Park with some 4 furlong drills. I think if Carl Spackler is anywhere close to the horse that we saw last year, and for that matter, the year before, he is very much the horse to beat. Given the $3 base for this ticket, I needed a single somewhere, and I'd be pretty surprised if Carl Spackler was ready and got beat here. The only other horse I do want to talk about is horse number 3, Tricari, who also comes in off of a bit of a layoff. He hasn't run since October 26th. He was a beaten favorite in a grade 3 here, but I take that effort with a grain of salt. He did not have a great trip in that race. He checked at the 6 furlong pole. He checked again, turning for home. It wasn't a great trip. 2 starts ago, though, he was fourth, beaten just a length and a half by Johannes, who was a very nice runner. And he wound up posting some very good efforts last year. He won the Grade 1 Belmont Derby. He won a couple of Grade 2 races, including the Secretariat at Colonial. This is a nice horse that, if John Velasquez decides to take him back, could well wind up getting the setup. Now, I see Graham motion, and with motion horses, sometimes they need a race coming off of a very long layoff. Motion is a very patient trainer, but I don't think Tricari would be in here if he wasn't doing well either. I think Tricari is probably your second most likely winner. And if you're looking for a horse to potentially play in contests or you want to go against the grain, I think this is probably the one that you want. But I think Carl Spackler is going to be very, very tough to beat. And for that reason, I didn't get cute. I'm singling him, and I'm using this Turf Pick 3 as a way to try to extract some value from that runner.
Yeah, I have Carl Spackler as a lone A in this race. Not going to get too cute here. Yeah, going to use Carl Spackler on all my tickets. I did have a little bit of concern, and that's the fact that I do think there's going to be a bit of pace in here. And granted, this is a horse that can come from a little bit off of it. But this is Pratt's first time riding the horse. Like I said, this is a horse that does have some natural speed, and you got horses like Santorini inside, Silent Heart outside, Northern Invaders another one that has shown some speed. Um, you know, the only way I see Carl Spackler losing is if he gets involved in some type of weird pace battle up front. Um, I do think that the chances are slim. However, if it does happen, I think you are going to get paid off. So, Integration is a horse that I have written down as a B, but honestly, I'm still kind of on the fence what I'm going to do with this horse because I do think, unlike Carl Spackler, who we know is absolutely a mile horse, this is a horse that I think probably wants to go further.
Mile and an
However,
eighth or a mile and a quarter. Absolutely.
however, this is really the one true closer in this race. So if this horse was maybe a longer price, I could give a more ringing endorsement. But at its 3-1 in the morning line, I just don't feel like great about being like, hey, use Carl Spackler and use the second choice as a B. So yeah, I don't know. I think from like a ticket construction perspective, this is probably bad. Like my guess is that if for some reason that 13 does draw in and I use the 6, 12, and 13 the leg before, this is the horse I cut. Right? I don't use integration here. Um However, the one horse I'm kind of interested in is the number 4 Grand Aspen. Now, you're looking at this. You're looking at these PPs, right? This is the horse that broke its maiden at Ellis Park, going a mile and eighth on the turf. Um, went and went to Kentucky Downs and ran a nice second to Santorini, who went wire to wire in at a Kentucky Downs race that was playing to speed, and then they tried dirt. And you know, I don't know. Went to Jonathan Thomas's barn. They kept trying dirt. Then they put this horse down the hill, and you got a much improved effort going down the hill. And then they did a mile on the turf. And once again, I mean, he finished fourth, but he was fourth by 3/4 of a length in that race. But more importantly, this is the horse that's going to want to close. This is the horse that's going to want to come from off the pace. And I mean, you're giving me 30-1 on a Jonathan Thomas horse on the turf, third off the layoff, with the one jockey I know is not going to try and get involved early on a turf horse in a race that maybe is going to have a ton of speed. I'm going to use Grand Aspen. I have it as a B. Underneath type as well if you're playing exactas, tournament play, all kinds of things. I love Grand Aspen in here. And, maybe we get a little bit of a price underneath.
I can't say I blame you for going price shopping to a certain extent. I didn't like integration much in here, especially at his likely price. If this race was a mile and an eighth, I'd love him. If this race was a mile and a quarter, I'd love him. I think a mile's a little bit too short. I don't think he quite has that miler turn of foot. I think he wants a little bit more ground to be able to grind away and be able to run horses down in the stretch and pull away late. He hits me as a mile and an eighth, mile and a quarter horse. I think that's outed itself pretty good. His lone effort going a mile on his sheet came in this race last year. He was a distant third, granted over a very yielding, boggy turf course that he probably didn't care for. But I looked at this horse and is this horse supposed to run in this race? Yeah, I guess. But a lot of that is probably just because it's not like there's a lot of grade one races for horses going a mile and an eighth to a mile and a quarter. The other thing I find very interesting is look at the ownership group of integration, then look at the ownership group of the 8 Northern Invader. They're both West Point horses. I think it's very interesting that ownership group has 2 horses in here. And you mentioned looking for a horse that's a bit of a closer. Granted, this horse's efforts closing came on Lasix, but I wouldn't be shocked if Northern Invader took back. And I know that sounds sort of crazy given his effort last time out at Tampa Bay Downs, where he set a pretty fast pace and wound up finishing second, beating 3/4 of a length. But if you look at his sheet, you see a couple of races where he has at least shown he can sit back and run well late. I wouldn't be shocked if Northern Invader is in the middle of the pack going into the first turn and you hear a whole bunch of people who bet the horse going, "Oh my God, Jose Ortiz, what are you doing?" But it's not like that horse hasn't closed in the past. He's actually run fairly well closing in the past.
All right. So I got our tickets up here. Andrew, more importantly, we actually have a consensus ticket.
Nice.
But we'll go ahead with your ticket first here. You get a $3 pick 3. You get the 3, 5, 8, and 9 with the 5, 7, 12 with the 6. That's going to be a $36 play. And then I have a $54 play, and mind you, this is using my A's and B's. So if you prescribe to the A B method, this would be a cheaper ticket. But it's 158 with 612, and like I talked about the 13, that 13 draws in. You see Flavia on the board. I'm tossing that horse in as well, and then 146 in the last. Like I said, if you want to make this cheap, single the 6. Just, I mean, I that's my lone A in that last race, probably my my top confidence play. But if we're trying to, trying to see if we can beat that horse a little bit, we do have 2 other options. I'm not as in love with the one at the price, but maybe we spike something. We'll be interested to see what happens. Consensus ticket 5, 8, with 12, with 6.
I don't hate that ticket, Josh.
I mean, it's got our top picks basically in each of the races.
It's not like I'm throwing in a B at the last second to save us a consensus ticket either. Like, if the 12 and the 6 win their respective races, I have a pretty good day.
Yeah. Anything else, Andrew?
Not really here, no. As a note to those of you looking for a look behind the curtain, we actually are on a little bit of a time crunch here, so I'm going to do my co-host Josh a solid. And Josh, if you want, you can hit the music and I'll hit the outro. That's going to wrap things up for this week's edition of Drank and Champagne. You can catch the live stream on Thursday. I think you can catch You've Got to Be Shot-Tinning Me later on this week with Josh and our friend Matt Carlson, who had a big day at Happy Valley on Wednesday. Shout out to our buddy Matt. If you're on YouTube, go down below, hit all the buttons, like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you're following us on another podcast service, leave us that 5-star review. We very much appreciate it. For Josh Rodriguez, I'm Andrew Champagne signing off. It's money, everybody.
See you guys.